3 freaking games. Let's get straight to it. This mode. Bang. Freaking check. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, general. I just played against a kid. Per individual, it's 400. I played one of the most. It's profoundly shocking. 400 nowadays. Watch this. Knows. Oh, so no, we're gonna just do the game review and I'm gonna do my move and I'm gonna present y'all 3 games in the Endgame. And then I'm gonna give y'all 25 tips to basically I'll say like high level Endgame tips and different concepts that we're gonna go specifically in video with. So meaning by this, we're gonna do this game review trash. We're gonna look over this game against 400 rated players who played a clinical beginning transitioning to endgame. Like abnormally good. Like abnormally. In the sense of how it's going to the wild for game. So yes. I mean, not normal. 400 rated players. I got some Little King's Counterplay. Response to E5. I got my F3. He goes knight f6. I go with the Roy Lopez. He responds with the Berlin defense. A 400 rated player knows the Berlin defense. Explain to me how a 400 level rated player is playing the Berlin defense and puts up a good fight too. Like that's what we play with 400s. We understand endgames, we understand how to liquidate, like that's just flabbergastingly so just for me. Like he's a 400 and he's doing this. He's that confident. So I develop my knight to protect my bishop. We go in 419 Spanish variation at transpose, and he goes to the double Spanish variation. So basically 2 really opens, so 4 knights game, very symmetrical, and my castle, my opponent castles, is playing really well. I do now go for trade. Pawn takes. I kick out the bishop, forcing the trade, liquidating, then queen takes, then rook takes the d file. I'm freaking what move we at? Rook takes d1. I have access to the d file, so I have a slight advantage. We have 2 minor pieces, and could even liquidate it even more like takes, something like this too. And my opponent plays bishop g4, relatively good pin. I know it's okay. My pawn's hanging. He didn't take the opportunity to take a pawn, be up a pawn, so I'm immediately going to defend. And this is what we're using color complexity. My rook is on the opposite color of this bishop, so this bishop's relative value is a little bit lower. And this knight is, how do I say, it's still good. It has a pretty good outpost. If my opponent was able to take an opportunity, take this pawn, and reroute like this, me getting on the semi-rank would have been way harder, which is going to be a decisive factor of the game. And he makes these small little tiny errors and details. So he takes, I don't open up my king, I damage my pawn structure. He goes and takes the d file. I go bishop to e3, just simply targeting the a7 pawn. He puts his knight on the rim, which is just slowly, like it's not terrible, but he didn't have the right idea. He should be trying to reroute his knight to put pressure on this pawn and working together with these rooks to gain this square right here, the freaking d5 square, and always scooting his king over to fight for these squares over here. So I want to be able to get access to the files easily. So my opponent didn't have the right long-term strategy, but overall isn't a bad move. I mean, he's trying to put an outpost on f4, so think about that. He's putting an outpost. Even on the knight on the rim of day, as a 400, he wants to go here. What in God's name, Earth? Who does that? Who does that? Who trades off and move 9 as a 400? That's nuts. So I go freaking rook to d1 to challenge the file. Rook takes simplification. Now I have control of the file and access to the simplifier. The only mistake my opponent attempted made was this, because his king is castled and cannot scoot his king over to fight for these last squares, and that was basically the deciding factor of the game. This rook was like next to this king, for example, like That was the only mistake he really made. He had the right idea, he just didn't capitalize on that idea in the long-term strategy. In the sense of that. So, right? And then that's just a mistake. Like, he had the wrong idea. Should have put his knight here to have a beautiful outpost against my rook. And then, freaking, if my rook on the 7th rank, he should have tried to slide over, defend the pawn. The king should have tried to work together. So he had the right idea, just tactically executed it wrong. So I immediately go rook to d7. He immediately pushes f4, trying to open up lines to the rook. So I take the pawn, which is a mistake. I should have taken with the rook. And then he attacks my rook. Tempo. I scoot over, take the pawn, and liquidate the queen side pawn. So takes, knight takes. I kick the knight out with f pawn, and and I hung a pawn on accident. So it's still equal interior, however, my activity is so much more paramount. Now, he coordinates with his rook and knight. Oops. In a pretty well sense of understanding that I hung a pawn, and he's putting a very good amount of pressure. And putting a good amount of pressure coordinating with the knight and the rook. His goal should be trying to get my h-pawn so he can throw these pawns down the board. And it would become this basically a pawn calculation. Like, notice why my bishop is here too, just in case. Pay attention to this later. But this h-pawn's not going. So, pawn to d4 equalizes. Push. And then he decides to check me. So yes, I made the wrong one because that's just technically a hanging pawn. Got king scoot over. He restricts my king again. So I'm slowly pushing these pawns, the A and B pawns together, and then he blunders his decision. He finally makes a mistake on last, and the geometrical coordination between my hand was really hard, and just relatively his piece is trapped. And I just continue to chase his piece, to waste tempo, keep wasting tempo, and then I pounce the ass on A pawn, and I just I could have took the knight here, but I was just playing so fast. I know that his knight would not be able to geometrically catch up with this pawn, so I decided to take the pawn, and then it just slowly becomes like so. He passes outside h pawn, and then now I put my bishop behind the rook and then just push, move, push, and then I block like this, which was just a decisive factor, destroying his counterplay. And I could have probably did something like, yeah, I did a deciding factor, then I do bishop a takes h2, knight takes, and then I just continue to harass the knight on my king, and then stop, and stop the outside pass pawn, and then check, and then mate. So basically, then it's just ladder mate. Beautiful game by my opponent. He played extremely well. I mean, I'm not even played a good positional squeeze on him, but eventually forced a mistake through this precisional play. So the point is that he forced a favorable endgame. He just had the lack of practical execution. And then I outplayed him by changing the nature of the game. I created a symmetrical opening through a rook and minor piece endgame through 5-5 control. My average time for move was barely even endgame. I was just going straight off as quickly as I can. 0.1 seconds, 2.5 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, under 1 second, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 1 second. That's crazy. But as we get the game analysis in this website, which have more higher depth engine, which is 51.3%, I'm gonna go pull up the other study guides. We're gonna go over the 2 other games together. Let's go. And hey, just as we pause, make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. I'm gonna give y'all a little bit of silence to process the information that you guys learned with. Hey, make sure y'all hit that calendar bell link if you're ever interested in game if you want to get endgame conversion like this. Calendar link. Look at the terms and conditions. Check out my website. Link in the description. All that beautiful stuff. Share this with somebody, comment, give feedback. Hey, so let us go to the next study. I'm gonna be quiet for a moment so I can process all the information. Okay, archives. I don't even know which one. Is it this one? That's security for device. I don't even know. I think it's this one. I guess you can try this one. Oh my goodness. This is probably not loading up page. There we go. Okay, so just load. Just give it some time to load, okay? So if I play about with 80% accuracy for a low def engine, probably better with a high def. Oh my goodness, please load. Thank you. Okay, here's the flip. Okay, full control. Okay, I think this is the game. This one, this one. This one? No, I think that's just a time chest. No, that's just not completely an idiot, and I'm just stupid. That's fine, this looks good. This one? I believe no. This guy. This guy. Is this it? Which one is 20, 20, 20, 21st, okay, so somewhere here. Is that it? Is this it? 25 points. Was it? This guy? This one? I was just checking. Look how freaking rough that game I had. That's just today. I think I played this game 2 days ago, so maybe I can check out more. What is that? I think this one. Oh yes, both these games, yep. He's stupid. Now I'm gonna check. Basically, I think it's this. It's Pierce defense. Let me check. Okay. I think this is the game. I want to go game review on analyze. Okay. Wait. I think this is the opposite. The other one. This is. Okay, I think he did the Pierce defense, but he made a mistake with the pawn, which is Pierce defense. Oh no, this is not the Pierce defense, so this is the other one. It's not this one. Okay. Let me put the valve key open, I'm slightly dubious. Excuse me. Oops. Okay, so was right after content. There you go. Whew, oh god. Yeah, I did see I have two weaknesses. Check. Mastering Endgame conversion. Yep, this is it. As my computer wants to be slower than a fish. I appreciate y'all patience. It means a lot, man. Yep, magic here, since Frosty Black, April 19th. Yep, beautiful. Okay, let's talk about Francis Andre Philidor. And the style of this will be mastering endgame conversion. 1 bar checkmate, 0-1, April 19th. As you see, I'm black, he's white. The Philidor position, a winner's perspective. The Philidor's position is an endgame advanced theoretical concept taught as essentially drawing technique in rook and pawn versus rook endgame. So rook and pawn versus, so basically king, rook, pawn, king, rook. No, I meant king and pawn endgames. No. In rook and pawn versus rook. Yep, that's what I was trying to say. And the kings obviously are added because they need to be there. The defender places their rook as third rank, cut off the enemy king from dropping to the 8th rank. So it's on the third rank. Once the pawn goes to the 6th rank, then you put your rook to the 8th rank to constantly put checks so the king can never, like geometrically, ever help the pawn to promote without checking. However, as I was the one with the winning advantage, my entire objective was to deny the Philidor setup. That was founded and created by Francis Andre Philidor. It's one of the best players of the 17th century, I believe, late 16th. To take a guess, my history may be wrong. I achieved a massively to decide this game total restriction by dominating on the 7th rank or 2nd for black. With my rooks, I paralyzed the white king. And that's when the rooks were getting passive defense. Exactly the nightmare I forced upon the white. Let's talk about the principles of true weakness. In endgame theory, a single weakness like one pass pawn can also be blockade. To break a defense, you must structure your opponent's resources by creating a second weakness on the opposite side of the board. Weakness one was the B pawn majority, where I had to dedicate the king stopping it, and then the king side H pawn. By advancing both pawns on both flanks, white pieces remain, fail, or stretch beyond their defensive capability, leading to a maiden net inevitable promotion. And now, scroll. And we're going to go over 25 grandmaster paths for endgame play, and every single one of these tips, I'm going to go an in-depth video about. Make one and put this into a part of a series of the 25. I'm going to think of a title name. Okay, opponent goes knight to c3. On the Van Green opening, slightly dubious. Oh my days. And I go c5. Go for Sicilian. Going for a little Sicilian defense. It's angry. I was just feeling really combative in this game. Develops his knight, so 2 minor pieces are out. And I go d5 to equalize. Or tiny slight disadvantage. My opponent played e3. I should have took and transposed into a 9-off. However, I decided to liquidate into an endgame. By doing, hey, this freaking thing is blocking the screen, you stupid thing. My gosh. And decided to liquidate into an endgame like this. Takes, and then knight capture backwards on d1. So the concept, c5, d6, c5. And then my opponent makes a mistake of playing pawn to e4. Just giving up the right to castle. Oh my goodness, you annoying little thing. Stop popping up. My goodness. Nasty thing. I'm going to just turn off the analysis. I'm tired of it. Disgusting thing. e4, which gives up his right to castle. I liquidate into an endgame, and he captures incorrectly. He should have captured with the knight. King takes. Right. Freaking bishop. Freaking g4. Putting a pin to the king. Absolute pin. And he goes to do the same exact counter pin. I take damaging his pawn structure, giving up a part of the bishop pair, doing the same bishop and knight and rook versus knight, bishop. So basically, very same endgame with damaged pawn structures, open d file and freaking g file. So I go queenside castle check. bishop blocks, and my goal. So, and I make one major mistake here. This mistake, when I did this, I overextended my pawn, and his knight could have got a beautiful outpost here, which would completely equalized the game. I was honestly just playing very quick and just missed that, and that was completely my fault. If let's say my opponent could have punished me like this, and completely equalized the game. Completely equalized. Engine will show it too. Yep, really perfect. Which was completely my fault. But however, thank God, he missed that and actually traded in a way that made his knight outpost impossible to do interference in my rook. He takes my knight and I capture back on the pawn to gain dominance and grip of the freaking d file to get the access to d4 and d5 squares. And the knight can't route itself to freaking b5 either. So he trades into a favor where my double pawns are and set up in a really good. So he moves his knight backwards. Um, I don't even understand that. Then I just develop my knight, and then my opponent does a pawn push, not thinking about what is hanging. And I missed the put pressure on the pin piece as quickly as I can. I completely missed that, and I captured the pawn instead of taking like this and playing more ruthlessly. I could have probably, if I was actually really calculating, trying my best, I would have instantly did it. But I was playing more for speed, so I missed that, and that's on me. Let's try off this stupid little analysis. My days pissing me off. No wait, no. I go bishop to d8. No. I go bishop to freaking d6. That's what I'm talking about. I'm bugging. My apologies. And then f takes, and then bishop takes e5. Then pawn to f4, and then I capture on b. I capture on b2, which scoots. And I made a slightly dubious move, putting my knight's rich bishop at the edge of the board, protecting the freaking c5 pawn, which I should have just simply continued to put pressure on the pin piece and simply either retreated this way or captured the knight. However, I thought this rook gaining access to this, basically being able to control the diagonal, putting pressure this way and rerouting the bishop would be a little bit better. That was my initial idea. Where am I at? Rook to b1, bishop a3. That calls engine calls it inaccuracy, and pawn. It's just making pawn moves that put absolutely great pressure on the bishop. The knight is absolutely restricted, and the bishop it's just valid like relative value as a piece activity. This game's over. So he pushes the pawn again, and I put more pressure on the pin piece. My opponent can't deal with the pressure and just lunges his rook. I take with a counter check to guarantee the win of the rook and the pawn and the c pawn. So king scoots, pawn takes, frickin' knight moves, frickin' rook takes, knight takes, takes frickin' okay, two pass pawns, A and B pawns, and the king is completely restricted. Then he goes try to get some counterplay. I trade off materials, simplify, and then this is going to be something so stupid, but I thought, oh, I'm relatively pinning the pawn to the knight, which the pawn doesn't move. But just basically attacking the hanging pawn, and then that going for my internal pawn. I just continue to push, and the king can catch. However, I use the tactic to win the other rook, and then the game's just decisive. I take the final pawn, king takes, I kick out the knight, and then the knight traps itself geometrically. This knight is relatively dead, and that's the decisive factor of the game. I have two rooks against a dead knight, and the knight literally cannot go anywhere except this corner. Literally. It's cooked. I could literally walk down to this king, go like this, freaking this, he can go here. I could literally just go like this and take it, but I'm going to end the game more efficiently. My opponent goes king to c4. I immediately go king to d2, defending everything, having the a pawn as an outside pass pawn as a threat. He goes ahead and tries to go for my, I don't even know what he's trying to do. Probably trying to shoulder my king, maybe? And then I pass the a pawn, deflecting the king to capture it, and then I start putting my other h pawn. So when the knight tries to defend, I check, king scoots, king attack the knight, Then I check and win it, and then I just simply pass, get the pass H pawn, and then queen check, and then it's mate in, well, I think freaking, yeah, I think in 4 moves. In 3 moves, yep, check, check, and then mate. Beautiful checkmate at the end of the game, like this. That's not what and why. And that's how you master endgame conversion. That's a great practical example. So already 25 grandmaster tips for endgame play. As a hyperbole, not saying literally grandmaster, king and pawn fundamentals. The king is the fighting piece. Whatever in the endgame, centralize your king immediately with about 4 points of relative value of attacking power. The rules are draw an imaginary right triangle or diagonal for the pass pawns from brushing the instantly calculated. The king can catch it without relying on deep calculation. 3 is shouldering. Look, use your king physically to block the enemy king for entering T sectors of the boards or squares or certain certain freaking, or just using the king to gain the space you shouldering the other king to not get certain vital areas in the board. Force of opposition, placing your king directly opposite of the king with odd numbers of squares between them. So odd numbers, what are they? 1, 3, 5, freaking 7, 9, 11, all that trash. But think about it like this: 1, 3, 5, and 7 is all you need to know. Because it's like chessboard is 8 by 64, so all you need to know is that you a freaking odd number of squares, the counting the squares apart from the king, that's how you get opposition. So think about it as, okay, am I 1 square apart? Am I 7 squares apart? Am I 5 squares apart? Am I 3 squares apart? Etc. Etc. Of the king to get opposition. And then that's like more advanced stuff. So create an outside pass pawn. Pawns from should be considered most dangerous because you drag the enemy king from the main battlefield. Let's transition to rook mastery. Rooks belong behind passed pawns. When your pawn or your opponent's or your opponent's pawn, place your rook behind it to match out your scope and pawn moves. The second rank absolute, place your rook in the 7th rank. Second for black is devastating, or even getting 2. You see how I sacrificed a whole piece to get 2 rooks on the 7th rank to guarantee a win of that back material because of the spanning checks and eventually walking into a fork. And double in the 7th. Like I said, 2 rooks in the 7th rank are worth a piece sacrifice that you achieve. They create main nets and create basically absolutely chaos. Number 9 is active rook and pawn. Never accept a passive defensive position to save a single pawn. Activity is more paramount. In the chaos position, learn this fundamental winning subtly. It's a bridge for you to build a shield from your king and avoid it in the opposite of the Philidor's position. How to overcome that. Now, every single one of these tips will go into in-depth guides about it. Minor piece dynamic. Bishops need open diagonal. Endgame. The bishop pair is always better than 2 knights in the endgame if it's an open game.